Hi, my name is Brooke Clifford, and I am doing the theory extension assignment for CMST 430. So this is the face negotiation theory, and I've decided to do it in a sort of Q&A sort of format. So first I'll discuss Stella Ting Toomey. So this is kind of a behind the theory description. Stella Ting Toomey created the face negotiation theory in 1985 when she wrote Toward a Theory of Conflict and Culture. And then in 1988, she wrote an article about intercultural conflict styles of face negotiation theory, and that's kind of when she reinforced the theory and really developed it. So, who is Stella Ting Toomey? So, she is actually a professor of human communication studies at California State University at Fullerton. She's also the author and editor of 17 different books and has served on 15 editorial boards. She's received several awarded recognitions through her job at CSU, and she's discussed by her peers as incredibly humble even through her success. So, next we'll kind of talk about face negotiation theory defined. So, what is face negotiation theory? So, it's developed by Stella Ting Toomey, as we discussed, and it kind of explains the culture based and situational factors that shape communicators' tendencies in approaching and managing conflicts. The meaning of face is generally conceptualized as how we want others to see us and treat us, and how we actually treat others in association with their social self conception expectations, according to the Encyclopedia of Communication. Face was explained to me as a metaphor for how someone portrays themselves to others. So it's basically self image. Ting Toomey, in a published article about intercultural conflict training, as face refers to a claimed sense of desired social self image in a relational or international setting. Face is described as both public and private by her in an interview for the book A First Look at Communication Theory. According to the same article written by Toomey, there are 7 basic core assumptions. So I'll kind of walk through these and then develop them later in the presentation. So first, people in all cultures try to maintain and negotiate face in all communication situations. 2, the concept of face is especially problematic and emotionally threatening or identity vulnerable situations when the situated identities of the communicators are called into question. The third one is the cultural value spectrum of individualism, collectivism, and small, large power distance shape Facebook concerns and styles. Number 4, individualism and collectivism value patterns shape members' preferences for self-oriented face concern versus other-oriented or mutual-oriented concern. Number 5, small and large power distance value patterns shape members' preferences for horizontal-based facework versus vertical-based facework. 6, the value of dimensions in conjunction with individual, relational, and situational factors influence the use of particular facework behaviors in particular cultural scenes. And 7, intercultural facework competence refers to the optimal integration of knowledge, mindfulness, and communication skills in managing vulnerable identity-based conflict situations appropriately, effectively, and adaptively. Later in this assignment, I will reflect on these 7 core assumptions and relate them to a modern phenomenon and critique them. So next, we're going to continue to define face negotiation. So Ting Toomey said individualistic cultures emphasize on personal initiative and achievement, while collectivistic cultures are more worried about group harmony over personal interests and are more worried about peers' faces. So Ting Toomey also identified the United States as one of the most highly individualistic cultures in the world. So culture is dynamic, not static, according to Ting Toomey, and she constructed this theory based on the fact that the two kinds of cultures function completely differently than one another. When it comes down to it, basically, Ting Toomey analyzes these things so you can point out generically how someone from a different culture would react in conflict management situations. There are specific ways they handle conflict and identity, also known as face. Self-construal. So this is a new concept that Toomey has recently, with peers, kind of fallen upon. So the definition is the degree that which people conceive themselves as relatively autonomous from or connected to others. It has been noted that self-construal is a better reliable source of how conflict styles relate to your cultural backgrounds. Ting Toomey herself refers to face negotiation in progress. To preface face negotiation theories, I'll discuss face concern. Face concern is said to be regard for self face, other face, or mutual face. According to a first look at communication theory, face restoration is one of the face negotiation strategies, and Ting Toomey said it's primarily used in individualistic cultures because it's centered on the fact that there's no personal loss of freedom. Face giving, however, is another strategy, and it's about including others and supporting them in that journey, which is more about collectivistic cultures. Moving on, we'll talk about how the theory's been tested and how it is a good theory or not. So overall, this theory was tested in 2003. A research program tested the underlying assumption of the face negotiation theory, that face is an explanatory mechanism for cultural membership's influence on conflict behavior. It was conducted across 4 different nations and with more than 700 students. The test ultimately proved the theory to be correct and really backed it up, but this turned out to have interesting results regarding face itself, because the critique is said to have that the participants actually self-reported, and because of this, participants could have been trying to save their own face while making these self-reports. So the critique is that this research might not have been self-sustainable. So according to the scientific standards listed in a first look at communication theory, Ting Toomey meets many of these different standards. Her explanation of the data is pretty clear. She lays it out well in her first 2 articles regarding the theory and in articles following. The theory is relatively simple, which is the 3rd scientific standard that a good theory should meet. And as far as utility goes, the theory is useful and could help others control their day-to-day life should they actually utilize it. My opinion is that Ting Toomey is clear on what face is and describing it in many scholarly articles and in her video-based interviews. Being clear on how your theory works and what it's based on is more important to me as a student. When applied to my contemporary event, mindfulness, face is even more important than ever. Now we'll discuss mindfulness, what it means to me, and how it's connected to face negotiation theory. So in almost every article I read, Ting Toomey actually discussed what being mindful was, which I found very interesting, since some of these articles date back to the mid-1980s. And although everyone's definition can differ a little bit, according to Merriam-Webster, mindfulness is the quality or state of being mindful, or the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis, like a state of awareness. Mindfulness is a contemporary context because it is just now becoming a bigger deal in our culture. We are just now recognizing this concept as something real and valid. Even BuzzFeed is jumping in on the bandwagon, constructing articles about how you can be more mindful in your day-to-day life. The Huffington Post has an entire journalistic beat focused on mindfulness and meditation, and CBS News did a 60 Minutes focused on mindfulness. And when they asked what mindfulness was, the interviewee, John Kabat-Zinn, replied by saying, what it really means is awareness. So what mindfulness means to me. So knowing me, you might not believe it, but I do meditate 3 times a week. I began this practice after I lost my father, grandfather, and youngest brother consecutively during my college career. I began attending group therapy both on and off campus, and in both groups, mindfulness was heavily discussed and utilized. Honestly, not one of the attendees knew what mindfulness was before these groups. Mindfulness has become a very large part of my everyday life. Being present in every moment of my life is incredibly important to me. So when we discuss face negotiation, one of the largest elements are how it applies to cultures. Collectivistic cultures are all about group harmony, right? Well, that's a part of what being mindful is. We are taught in our therapy groups to reflect on how others might not be mindful of our grief or situations, but that we should be mindful of them anyways. Collectivistic cultures do just that. They try to band together even if it's not something they are supported in or believe in. Ting Toomey believes that mindfulness is one of the requirements for effectively communicating across cultures. A look at communication theory describes mindfulness as a conscious choice to seek multiple perspectives on the same events. Your ability to interact with others, both inside and outside of your culture, all boils down to mindfulness and how you can apply it. So this is the extension part of my project. I believe that the theory structure is sound, has very little gaps, but as Ting Toomey says herself, is ever growing and changing. The way we perceive others may not be the same as it will in 5 or 10 years. So one of my core assumptions is that self-image itself is not static. Um, so even though this is a newer theory, we are seeing it consistently change with the addition of self-construal and other things that I mentioned earlier. If I were Ting Toomey, I would add an eighth core assumption that self-image is always changing and our value of self-image is only a current. For example, in the 90s, everyone wanted the drug addiction, thin kind of body, right? Well, now we are more accepting of curves and body positivity in general. That's a new kind of self-image we as a community adapted, and I don't think that generically talking about self-image does this theory any good. One large inconsistency for me in this theory is the first of the 7 core assumptions. So I don't believe, from my 22 years here on Earth, that everyone tries to save face. I think that in general, maybe they do, but overall, not everyone does. I've worked in food service. I've seen how angry people can get over a 40-minute long ticket time or a wrong pizza order. So as a refresher, this assumption is that people in all cultures try to maintain and negotiate face in all communication situations. And even though Ting Toomey herself kind of demeans individualistic cultures, she makes this first assumption. So overall, as I said, I do believe the theory is valid and is strong. I think that as it progresses, we will see more changes to the theory and developments. I do believe that more core assumptions will be added as they have in the past. Ting Toomey originally started out with 5 core assumptions and grew to 7. And I think this is just one of those theories that although it's good, it could use some changes. And so that's the end of my presentation. And then here are my face negotiation theory sources. I utilized the book, as I noted, and some intercultural conflict articles that Ting Toomey herself wrote. And then both of her articles discussing face negotiation theory. So toward a theory of conflict and culture, intercultural conflict styles of face negotiation theory. I utilized CBS News as one of my news articles for the extension part. And I also utilized a video interview that Ting Toomey conducted with a first look at communication theory. So that's the end of my project, and thank you.